Buddy, Chris Trapasso here for the Week 6 episode of the Nameless Football Show. Thank you so much for joining me. Big show on tap tonight. As always, I actually went with a little outline before this show. I had some extra time today. Usually I'm really almost just flying directly off the cuff. I am CBS Sports NFL.com, or CBS Sports NFL.com, yeah. CBS Sports NFL draft analyst and young player analyst. I'm always just so excited at the beginning of the show that I sometimes stumble over the intro. Again, as always, any questions that you have, the viewer, leave them in the comment section. If you're watching the next day, most likely Wednesday on YouTube, I appreciate it. Leave a comment on the video on YouTube, and I will get around to answering it, I promise. As people start to join in, a couple TikToks I'll just briefly go through. I'm going to kind of change things up a little bit. I said I do have some points that I want to get to on the NFL from Week 6. And not just rehash everything that I posted on TikTok. I posted a kind of an educational video on Kenny Pickett today that was not a bashing of Kenny Pickett, but it was just to show how young quarterbacks can often make a mistake of just not being patient inside the pocket. We see so much from Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and even Justin Herbert, of course. A lot of other mobile quarterbacks, Kyler Murray, running outside the pocket, making plays improvisationally, outside of structure, whatever you want to call it, ad-libbing, being creative, that I think some of these young quarterbacks are like, oh, my first read's not there, I'm going to get out. And watch the video on Kenny Pickett again, which is really to show that he's a young quarterback, and sometimes they make mistakes and misplays by leaving a clean pocket when there was no need for that. All right, I got my first question from High Quoted. Can you review David Long? Are we talking, let's see, there were two David Longs in the NFL. You're talking Titans linebacker David Long. I could get around to that. I haven't posted a Titans video in a while. And as always, Mike Vrabel is coaching his ass off. And the Titans, I don't think their roster is really that impressive, especially losing A.J. Brown. Derrick Henry's up there in age, gotten a ton of carries. I think we've seen the ceiling for Ryan Tannehill, and they've won back-to-back football games. So I think, I could do that tomorrow, or maybe even tonight. What I want to get to, watch the Kenny Pickett video. I posted a video on the juke before the hurdle in the Bills-Chiefs game, which I will get to later. More on that game, Bills-Chiefs. That was just superb football all around. Offense, defense, quarterbacking, everything. Receiver play, tight end play, blocking, everything. Schematically, it was fantastic. I posted a video on that. You can see the other videos that I've posted. Not a ton because I've had a lot going on. Early in the week is where I'm watching a lot of film, where I'm writing a lot for CBS Sports. Just posted on Tuesday. If you're watching this live on TikTok, that was today. If you're seeing this on YouTube, yesterday, the Week 6 grades for the first and second year quarterbacks. Some interesting performances. I went in having watched some of these games live thinking, Justin Fields, he played terribly against the Commanders on Thursday Night Football, and I left kind of feeling differently about it. Bailey Zappe's second start, I have thoughts on that, a grade on that. Zach Wilson in the win in Green Bay over the Packers. So get to that article. It's my most recent article if you're, again, watching this live on TikTok. But if you Google Chris Trapasso, CBS Sports, you will see near the top the Week 6 grades for the first and second year quarterbacks. It's a series that I'm running. I keep a cumulative season grade. I did it in 2019, 2020. Didn't do it last year, but I'm so glad to be doing it again this year. Okay, a question. Is Jalen Hurts the best quarterback in the league? Of course he's not the best quarterback in the league, and that is a perfect segue into what I wanted to talk about first. My first bullet point in my new outline that I probably should have been doing from the start with the Nameless Football Show at the beginning of the football season. The Eagles' win against the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football was good. Two really good defenses, impressive defensive fronts. Trevon Diggs, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence. The Eagles get out to the big lead in the first. I had a gigantic frog in my throat. All right, let's start that over. The Eagles' win on Sunday Night Football was good. They get out to the big lead against a defense, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Trevon Diggs, some other, Leighton Vander Esch is playing pretty good football at the linebacker spot. It was a good win. I don't think it was a great win, and here's the reason why. Jalen Hurts, to me, has taken a step, and he's progressed from starting late in his rookie season to last year as his first year as the full-time starter in Philadelphia to probably where he is this year. Do I think that he's the best quarterback in the league? No. Watching that game and then rewatching all of Jalen Hurts' dropbacks, it still seems very schemed up. Everything is a bootleg to the left, roll out to the right. There's a wide open Dallas Goedert, easy throw. RPO, slant, there's A.J. Brown completely wide open. Play action, deep over to Devontae Smith. No one's near him. Makes a completion. And a lot of times I've seen when Jalen Hurts has had to make those difficult tight window throws that the elite quarterbacks are making, he's not quite accurate enough as he needs to be. So I know that everyone's like, fly Eagles fly, they're 6-0, they get the big win. Felt like a playoff game against the bitter rival Dallas Cowboys. And while I think as a team, the Eagles have taken like 2 steps forward from where they were last year, kind of just creeping into the playoffs as a 7 seed. No one really gave them much of a chance against the Brady Buccaneers in Tampa, and that really wasn't much of a game. The team is way better. The additions that Howie Roseman has made have really paid dividends early on. I'm just a little bit worried about Jalen Hurts when they are maybe in a game again against the Cowboys where they're not facing a backup quarterback. And sure, Cooper Rush has played well, but it is a different ball game in terms of the ability of the quarterback and what he can do when it's Dak Prescott as opposed to Cooper Rush. There were some open throws in that game that Cooper Rush just couldn't make because he doesn't have the physical ability, the athleticism, the arm talent that Dak Prescott does. I'm a little bit like, if there is one concern that I have with this Eagles team at this point, I guess 2. They've been extremely healthy through 6 weeks, and they can't do anything about that. Just a lot of the other top-tier teams are dealing with injuries and have battled through them and are only a game or 2 behind the Eagles. Not that there's any, of course, award or any incentive to be the best overall record in the NFL. Besides, I guess you would guarantee that you're the 1 seed in your respective conference. But there's a lot of other teams that have dealt with a lot of injuries. The Eagles really have not. I know Lane Johnson went down in that game, and I haven't checked to see how long he's going to be out. I don't think it's going to be major. That is a concern to me, but the biggest concern is Jalen Hurts last year. I didn't give him a low grade in my first and second year quarterback series, but I didn't give him an exceptionally high grade. I thought he did a great job as a game manager, and Nick Sirianni's staff was spectacular, scheming, wide open, easy throws for him in that offense. And I have not seen Jalen Hurts individually take a huge step forward, making those difficult throws, quickly processing, second read, third read, getting the ball out, or when he is late, he cranks up the velocity, fits it between a linebacker and a safety, converging on a wide receiver. A lot of it is more just throwing it to the open receiver underneath and letting A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert and Miles Sanders and Devontae Smith create after the catch. Now, is that something that you can win a lot of football games with? Yes, but I think now at 6-0 and just all the pieces that the Eagles have brought onto this roster, they don't want to just be the best record team in the NFL. This is a team that right now, I mean, if you're the last team in the NFL that's undefeated, you have Super Bowl aspirations regardless of what those expectations were for your team going into the season. I'm just a little bit concerned about Jalen Hurts, that he individually, what he's doing as a passer and maybe even so as a runner, I don't know if he's gotten any better to elevate the rest of this team and the offense when Nick Sirianni and his staff can't just scheme everything up and A.J. Brown isn't making 3 defenders miss on a slant and turning a 5-yard pass into a 25-yard gain. That's the only concern that I had. I thought the Eagles' defense was smothering in that game. The defensive line is good. The linebackers are good. I love the addition of Kaiser White. TJ Edwards, one of my favorite guys to watch when he was at Wisconsin. Gem of an undrafted find for the Eagles. And, of course, the secondary is playing out of its mind and just a lot of big stars on that side of the ball. But I didn't think Jalen Hurts was that good in that game. And the kind of that game-sealing drive was run play, run play, run play. It was kind of a throwback to the 80s or 90s, and hats off to the Eagles and their offensive line for being able to just run it down the Cowboys' throat in that fourth quarter when the score got to 17-20. But eventually, Jalen Hurts is going to have to show us that he can be the guy that is pretty much the main reason why the Eagles win a game against a quality team with maybe a quality defense or a high-level quarterback or a mixture of the two. All right, now let me get to some of those questions. Let's see. Was Kenneth Walker... I'm going to try to stay away from fantasy questions. Was Kenneth Walker and Pickens for Lamb and ETN a good trade? Yes, definitely. Kenneth Walker is going to be a stud. He could win your league for you. Thoughts on Teven Jenkins? I absolutely love him at guard. I thought he could stay at right tackle or left tackle in the NFL. Maybe doesn't have like crazy athleticism. At guard, he's looked really good. I haven't gone back to just, like single him out in the Thursday night game. I watched Justin Fields, all of his throws, but there was nothing that from just watching Justin Fields dropbacks that I said, man, Teven Jenkins looks bad. I think he's been good, and he found a home at guard and has major upside at guard because he's nasty, he's well-balanced. I think he's got good handwork. He's not going to lunge too often at defensive linemen in pass protection. I will get to my thoughts on Josh Allen and the Bills. Are the Vikings a real 5-1 team? Not quite. I think in general we see 5-1 and we think this is an elite team. And I probably say this every week. I'm going to continue to say it throughout the season. You are not what your record says you are. I mean no disrespect to Bill Parcells, Hall of Fame coach, executive, whatever. I don't agree with his famous saying that you are what your record says you are. Point differential matters. If you're just squeaking by against mediocre to bad teams, that's going to catch up to you eventually. And the Vikings have played in a lot of close games. They did a good job handling the Dolphins in Miami, but they face a third stringer to start the game. Then they knock him out of the game, and it's Teddy Bridgewater, backup, who wasn't probably 100% to play. I think the offense moved the ball well against that Dolphins defense in the heat, but I would say they feel more like a 3-3 or a 4-2 team in theory than being 5-1. What's wrong with Baltimore? That was my next point that I wanted to bring up. Here's how I feel about the Baltimore Ravens through 6 weeks. It feels as though the Ravens can beat any team in the NFL. You can put them up against the Bills. They were up 17 points against the Bills. The Chiefs, they beat the Chiefs last season. They can beat any of the top teams. They could beat the Packers. They could beat any of the top teams, whoever you want to say those teams are. But they also, it feels like just watching them, the vibe that team gives off offensively, defensively, it also feels like the Ravens could lose to any team in the NFL. We're seeing so much parity in the league this year, even so last year. The Ravens feel like it's just impossible to peg them. They can come out and look like, man, this is arguably the top 3 team in the entire NFL, and then they can not look very good against the Giants, who I think are good. I don't know if they're quite as good as their record. They feel like they're kind of a year early from where the progression in that rebuild is. And I don't love what they have in terms of offensive firepower. It's really a Mark Andrews-based offense. Now, I do think when Rashad Bateman returns, that's a huge boost for Lamar Jackson. Excuse me. But I don't love the other pieces around him, even if it is Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay. Is that enough, Bateman, Duvernay, and Mark Andrews, to field a high-powered offense in today's NFL? Sorry, got that frog in my throat still. I don't know. And they're 16th in defensive DVOA right now. It's the Football Outsiders all-encompassing efficiency metric for offenses and defenses. Being in the middle of the pack defensively, I think with the makeup that they have, and this is the Ravens we're talking about here, offensively, I think they have to be better than that defensively. Now, they will get a little healthier as the season progresses. I don't know what voodoo has been cast upon the Baltimore organization over the last 3 or 4 years. Dealt with a ton of injuries. Marlon Humphrey will get 100% healthy. Marcus Peters is back. They'll get some pieces back. They could even get David Ojabo later in the season, the second-round pick out of Michigan. That would have been a first-round pick had he not torn his Achilles during the pre-draft process. I just really hard to peg the Ravens right now. And as for Lamar Jackson, I think I said it last week, that there is this chorus of like everyone feels like they need to defend Lamar Jackson as a way to push back against all the ridiculous pre-draft criticism. It's okay to say Lamar Jackson is not an elite level, like slam dunk, top 3, top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I think he's squarely in the top 10-ish, probably top 10. And at times he can play like a top 3 or top 4 quarterback. But usually those elite guys there's not as big of variance with them. They could have a down week, and maybe they're a top 7 or 8 quarterback. Lamar Jackson, when he's not playing well, looks like a middle-of-the-pack quarterback. When he's good, he could be best or second best or third best in the NFL. But there's a lot of inconsistency with him, pocket presence, accuracy. It's not saying that he should be a wide receiver or the Ravens shouldn't pay him. They clearly got an MVP caliber season from him. I don't want to say revolutionized the quarterback position because quarterbacks were running a little bit more by the time he entered the league, but he has really shown that he can be a 1,000-yard ball carrier in the NFL. He's the best running quarterback in league history, and I think he's pretty good as a passer. But to be pretty good as a passer in kind of a stagnant Greg Roman offense that doesn't have a lot of firepower at the receiver spot and is now missing their former first-round pick, Rashad Bateman, that's why the Ravens are where they are today. However, it's certainly not it's not over for them. I think they will be okay. The rest of the schedule is actually pretty, I don't want to say super easy because and there's upsets every week, but it's not super tough sledding, at least right now on paper, for the Ravens. I certainly think winning the AFC North for them is not out of the question. I'm just, again, for this team, for the team like the Eagles, they're not like, hey, let's go 11-6 and make the playoffs. They have bigger aspirations than that. And I think Lamar Jackson, when he's facing a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes or even a Justin Herbert, I'm a little concerned about him and that offense being able to stack up with the high-level attacks in the NFL. The offensive line, I think, as Ronnie Stanley gets healthy, will play better. But I just don't know if Greg Roman's offense and the personnel that the Ravens have is ready to field a top 3, top 5 offense, which is kind of what you want to have, especially if you don't have an elite defense like the Ravens are kind of middle of the road, middle of the pack. You want to have that elite defense that elite offense if your defense is not a super dominant unit to ultimately win a couple playoff games and have legitimate Super Bowl aspirations that are realistic. Okay, a few more questions. Scrolling through here. What's wrong with both? Thoughts on Montez Sweat's play so far this season? I try to watch as much film as possible. I got to tell you, I have not zeroed in on Montez Sweat, but I'm going to watch the Commanders' defensive line because I want to see what's going on. I know the back seven was a big problem last season. I did a couple TikToks. I did some radio spots. I want to say I maybe even wrote about it last year at CBS. And that, like, the defensive line, all the former first-round picks, certainly no Chase Young yet, but they were actually playing pretty well. I have not watched Montez Sweat. I know he is kind of rounded into form over the last couple years as like a above-average edge rusher. Not elite, not all-pro caliber, maybe like borderline-ish Pro Bowl caliber. But I have not watched him yet at length to have a formulated, concrete opinion. But I will get back to you on that, hopefully by next week. Did Ohio State limit Baron Browning's potential? Are the Broncos unleashing it? I think he was pretty good at Ohio State. It took him a couple years. He was a huge recruit for the Buckeyes, and I remember in that senior season that Ohio State defense, which played in the national title against Alabama that year, was absolutely loaded. Pete Werner, second-round pick linebacker, and Baron Browning in the same linebacker group, that two absolute studs, or at least athletically they were. I'm not really sure why it took him so long to take off, but in that final season for Ohio State, he was really good. Now, I did not see the pass rushing, like the edge rushing chops that he's shown in these first couple of weeks, or I guess month and a half of the season, but just athletically, and I tweeted it during the Broncos Chargers Monday Night Football game, the mock draftable web that shows where Baron Browning was in terms of percentiles among linebackers at the combine when he came out. He was like above 75th percentile in like the 3-cone, the vertical, the broad jump, 40-yard dash, all that. Big body, and I think now in year 2, year 3, he's year 2. He is just finally coming into his own, and things are slowing down for Baron Browning. Do you think the Broncos can pull it together? I think they could play better than they have. It would be pretty hard for them to play much worse, especially offensively. I think Russell Wilson and Nate Hackett will pull it together. But I think at this point, being 2-4 with how good the AFC is, and certainly the AFC West with the Broncos at 2-4, the Raiders only have one win. It's not as absolutely jam-packed as we expected. But there are other teams, like the Jets technically are filling in for one of those AFC West teams in terms of being a really formidable team, or seemingly a formidable team in the AFC. I don't know if it's going to be enough to make the playoffs. And I predicted the Broncos to be that number 7 seed in the playoffs. Kind of was looking at Dolphins, Raiders, Broncos, and I actually trusted Russell Wilson's play to be what was going to push the Broncos over the top. It is a long season. 2-4 is not, if you look at it historically, there's been many teams that have started 2-4 and made the playoffs. It's not 0-5, 0-6, where they have to go on an unprecedented run. I think they'll pull it together and play better football, and the defense is really good. Like the defense, add Randy Gregory to that group of Bradley Chubb and Baron Browning, Justin Simmons being back, Patrick Surtain playing lockdown defense at the outside corner position. I think the defense could maybe carry them and actually win some of these close games to help the Broncos kind of maybe sneak into the wild card hunt in December. I mean, they're kind of the opposite of the Vikings, that they've played a lot of close games and lost most of them. So I think they'll pull it together. I just don't know if it's going to be enough to ultimately make the playoffs in the AFC. More questions. Do you think Marquise... Let's see. Should I trade? No, I'm going to stay away from those. What's wrong with Green Bay? Well, the whole thing that's kind of weird about Green Bay right now is like there's like this public spat between Aaron Rodgers and his head coach, Matt LaFleur, that it's like, we need to simplify things. I don't need motion. But the offense that LaFleur has run over the last 3 years in Green Bay, it's a ton of motion. Like they're leading the league almost every year, or near the top of the league in motion rate. And I think that, I mean, I'm not Aaron Rodgers. I've never played quarterback in the NFL. Motion usually helps a quarterback detect, is it man, is it zone, where's the blitzer coming from? But Aaron Rodgers doesn't like it, and actually can watch or listen to the PMT podcast that Aaron Rodgers was on before the season, and he mentioned that about not really liking motion all the time and just wanting to run the play that it doesn't help you run with a lot of tempo, because you get set if you want to be up tempo and try to get the defense gassed and not really in a rhythm. Then you get huddled up, you get lined up, and then it's, oh, we got a motion, and it lets things slow down a little bit. I think that's a problem. The offensive line, which had been actually really, really good the first 2 or 3 years for the Matt LaFleur era, has not been as good. I know David Bakhtiari's working his way back. Teven Jenkins may not be 100%, but the interior of the offensive line is not great. And I think if that outside zone scheme is not the bread and butter and not getting 5-6 yards per pop for Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, given that there's no Devontae Adams in the receiver group that the Packers can just lean on and funnel the pass game through, that's why I think we're having some problems. And defensively, they're getting after the quarterback a fair amount. I don't think the linebackers are playing that badly. And maybe the secondary has been a little bit disappointing. I mean, to have a lot of young players, a lot of early round investment, and it hasn't really been a lockdown unit, that is really disappointing. And that, like, all those combination of things is probably why the Packers have gotten off to this really kind of surprising start, and certainly a very disappointing start. All right, a few more points that I want to get to. I kind of hinted at it at the beginning. So I watched Justin Fields Thursday night for my first and second year quarterback grade article that comes out every week on Tuesday at CBS Sports. I went in, I watched that game. My brother-in-law is a Bears fan. I watched it with him. It's weird. I wasn't impressed live, but then when I went back to rewatch, and a lot of times in that article, if a quarterback just runs out to his right and scrambles for 7 yards, that's not an impressive play. There were like 4 or 5 ridiculous escapes and then acceleration from Justin Fields with his legs in that game to create big plays on the ground. The touchdown to Dante Pettis was an absolute dime as he was getting hit. I don't even know how he had enough arm strength to get the ball, push it down the field on that cold night in Chicago. Actually, maybe it wasn't that cold, but I'm assuming it was not, the best weather to throw a football 50-plus yards as you're being hit. I just didn't think he was that terrible, and I'm saying this because, and I wrote this in the article at CBS Sports, sometimes rewatching, you get like a totally different perspective. And like that one was kind of shocking to me, even though I know that phenomenon exists. But that was one where I was like, man, I really thought Justin Fields played terribly. I think I gave him like a C plus or a B minus, which is for me, and I'm kind of a hard grader in that series. I was like, honestly, I don't think he was that terrible. What other points do I want to get to? Ravens. Oh, Bills and Chiefs. What more can I say about the game that you haven't already heard? I just wanted to speak on it because it was the regular season game of the year. Just circled that before the season, and it really lived up to it. I thought defensively both teams actually played pretty well, given what they were up against with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes made 5 or 6 just ridiculous plays with their arms, with their legs, with improvisation, ad-libbing. There's not really any more that I could add to it, but certainly all the implications of that game. Now, if the Bills and Chiefs tie in the regular season with their records, that game in the playoffs will be in Buffalo. Patrick Mahomes never played a playoff game on the road. So you probably heard everything else, and I probably agree with 90% of what you heard about the game. The Bills' defensive game plan and execution, especially without safety Micah Hyde, no Tre'Davious White, Christian Benford, the rookie corner who they raved about, goes down in the game. They're rotating so many defensive linemen. I think they did a fantastic job. Von Miller was borderline unblocked both 9 pressures, but I also thought Daquan Jones, the nose tackle, did a great job, generated some pressure. Ed Oliver was getting up the field, kind of just getting Patrick Mahomes off his base and out of rhythm. Boogie Basham had 2 pressures on 11 snaps. He's former second-round pick, big edge rusher, big powerful edge rusher, should probably play a little bit more. AJ Epinesa did really well. So the Bills' rotation up front, I think we really saw that in the fourth quarter. They were fresh, and they were able to kind of get Patrick Mahomes off his spot. And that last decisive play of the game was just fantastic schematically from Leslie Frazier, the defensive coordinator, and executed perfectly. Von Miller rushes to the inside on purpose to try to split that double team. Matt Milano playing the spy fills in that vacancy as he knows Patrick Mahomes is going to roll to his right, and Taron Johnson playing a little cover 2 trap is able to keep his eyes on the quarterback and make the play on the football. That's what it came down to. Both quarterbacks were outstanding, but Patrick Mahomes made 2 major mistakes, and Josh Allen really only made 1 on that first drive where he decided to pitch it to Isaiah McKenzie when he wasn't really ready for the pitch, or maybe wasn't even designed to ultimately get that pitch. Beyond that, Josh Allen, I thought, played fantastically. Bills get the win 24-20. All right, there's one more thing that I want to mention. I just want to see if there's any other questions. Thoughts on how Deshaun Watson will do when he gets back? I have no clue. I mean, he's been away from football for so long. The Browns' offensive line is good. They have a great run game. The receiver group is okay. I think Amari Cooper is one of the more underrated wide receivers, and just unheralded what he's been able to do production-wise with Jacoby Brissett throwing him the football and dealing with number 1 corners these first 6 weeks. Beyond that, there's not much, though. Let's see. Trade Amon-Ra St. Brown for CD. I would. I think I'm not going to say that the Amon-Ra St. Brown hype is done or that he's never going to be a productive wide receiver, but I think Jared Goff, the offensive line, maybe not playing as well as they were, or they certainly aren't playing as well as they were the first month of the season. And with Dak Prescott returning, I think CeeDee Lamb's numbers are going to go up. Let's see. I don't think there's any more questions that are non-fantasy related. How do you feel about Evan Neal against the Ravens? I got to watch the Giants offense. I plan on doing that. I know Saquon had a big day again. Why does Belichick always seem to find late gems at corner every year? I think he just knows cornerback really well. Like during the Tom Brady era, there was always a question of like who like was this dynasty more dependent on? Was it Tom Brady? Was it Bill Belichick? It probably was a little bit more Tom Brady. He's playing and executing the quarterback position as well as anyone in the history of the sport. But Bill Belichick is one damn good defensive mind, and he's played and he's coached a lot of high-level cornerbacks. I think he knows the exact type that he likes and wants and is going to work well in his scheme. He certainly had guys like Duke Dawson, who he traded up for on day 2 a couple years ago. That was a huge flop. But he's also found like Malcolm Butler, guys way back in the day in the early Brady era that were lower level guys. And now with Jack Jones and maybe Marcus Jones, I think he has 2 good young cornerbacks. They're young relatively because Jack Jones is about to turn 25, I believe. But first year guys that have looked really good in kind of these versatile inside out roles. Should the Lions stick with Jared Goff for another season? Probably not. I mean, they could keep him on the roster, but they got to draft a quarterback in round 1. They have those 2 first-round picks, their own, and then the Rams pick, which is not going to maybe be that low in the first round. Regardless of where it is, to have 2 first-round picks, you can maybe trade up or just pick a quarterback. I love Anthony Richardson for them. Younger, raw, major upside, all pro upside. Sit behind Jared Goff, learn the intricacies of playing the position. He would be one for me. If I were a Lions fan, Florida's Anthony Richardson, I would watch a lot of. Is Ron Rivera an overrated coach who seems to be stuck in the old days and can't adapt to the new NFL? I think he's a pretty good coach. Is he one that's adapting every second? Probably not. I think there's coaches that are adapting faster and more frequently than he is. It's really hard, though. If you followed me for any amount of time here on TikTok, on Twitter, my writing, at any point in my career, I am the biggest proponent in the NFL. I'm not saying coaches don't matter. You're as good as your players are. I mean, 5 years ago, everyone would have said Ron Rivera was one of the best coaches in the NFL. He goes to the Commanders, certainly in a huge fiasco with their ownership. I don't really think, even if Daniel Snyder doesn't sell the team, I don't really think the ownership is that great there. And the team's just not nearly as good. The offensive line isn't good. The back 7 on defense, not very good. Then you have Carson Wentz and Terry McLaurin and not much else at the receiver spot. So I think it's more that than Ron Rivera being a bad coach. One other point that I wanted to get to. This is fun. So early, I don't know if it was in the summer or it was early in the season. This is the last point. I'm running a little long tonight. But early in the summer, I think someone asked me, and I don't know if it was a video or if it was here on the Nameless Football Show, could the Jets be this year's Bengals? I think it was on this show because I remember now reacting to it live. And I said then that I didn't think it was crazy. There are similarities, a lot of similarities between those two teams. A good defensive line that has some depth, maybe not a bona fide superstar, but a lot of good pieces in Cincinnati, Sam Hubbard, Trey Hendrickson, a lot of pieces on the interior that were good but not great with the Jets. Carl Lawson, very good rusher, not an amazing rusher. You have John Franklin Myers, you have Quinnen Williams, who's probably the best interior rusher of any of those two teams. Then offensively, the makeup of last year's Bengals. Early round picks at the receiver spot. Jamar Chase. Tyler Boyd was a second or a third rounder, day 2 pick. T. Higgins, one of the first picks, or was he the first pick in the second round in 2020. And a young quarterback in his second season going all the way to the Super Bowl. So there's certainly components to it. The secondary's both pretty good. I think Sauce Gardner is probably the best in terms of pure talent cornerback of either of those two teams. Some decent safety play, linebackers unheralded but solid. It's an offensive line that's okay but not great. Improvisational quarterback that made a late rise during his final college season all the way up to the top of the draft with Joe Burrow going number 1 in 2020 and then Zach Wilson going number 2 the following season. It's actually kind of eerie how similar these teams are. It's crazy to me. The difference, though, is the quarterback. What Joe Burrow did last season, and he did not start extremely hot last year. It was really from November through the Super Bowl that he and Jamar Chase had this impeccable connection. He was making 3 or 4 big-time throws every single week in the face of pressure, down the football field. I haven't seen that yet from Zach Wilson. And actually, I wrote in my first and second year quarterback grade article for Week 6, the Packers lost to the Jets in Green Bay in Week 6 in spite of Zach Wilson really not playing that well. He did not, the Jets won that game despite the play of their quarterback. I did not think he was good with his pocket presence. There was a couple balls that were completed, but they needed to have better ball placement to maximize yards after the catch. A few pass breakups that occurred because Zach Wilson didn't have the best accuracy. I just did not think he was very good, and I don't know if I ever saw that type of performance from Joe Burrow last season, but if Zach Wilson does just suddenly become Joe Burrow-esque, of course, the quarterback being the most important position on the field, the rest of the Jets' roster makeup, its composition, is very, very similar to what the Bengals had last year. Now, the other kind of caveat, if you're getting super excited about this, is that Jamar Chase is by far, to me, the best receiver of that group. Elijah Moore, where's he been? Where has Elijah Moore been? He looked like ready to break out before Zach Wilson got hurt last season, and even a little bit with Mike White. When the Mike White experience happened for a couple weeks, he looked like, oh, he's going to be that next 7, 8, 900-yard wide receiver as a wide receiver 2. He's been almost non-existent, and I think that's been because his quarterback has not necessarily played very well. And we saw the 100-yard game in the comeback win over the Browns for Garrett Wilson, but he's kind of been quiet over the last couple weeks. They don't have a Jamar Chase that can just completely take over a game like the Bengals had last season, but the defensive lines, the investment at receiver, early rounds, second-year quarterback who was a high pick that ascended the draft ranks in his final season, kind of out of nowhere, can make some plays with his legs, doesn't have a huge arm, but can make those difficult throws on the run, will like to push it down the football field. There are similarities between the Jets and last year's Bengals. All right, guys, but again, the quarterback needs to certainly play better in New York, even close to where Joe Burrow was last season, for this to go from a really nice story at the start of the season for the upstart Jets and allow them to potentially morph into a serious contender in the AFC playoffs. Could you do a video about Tariq Woolen? I'm going to, because I'm going to write about Tariq Woolen and how good the rookie cornerback class has been so far in 2022. Kyer Elam's played well. Tariq Woolen, fifth-rounders, played well. Jack Jones, fifth-rounders, played well. Derek Stingley's played well. Sauce Gardner's played well. Trent McDuffie only played a little bit. He looked good early in the season. A lot of these, Martin Emerson, even on a bad Browns defense, he's played well. Third-round pick out of Mississippi State. So the young rookie cornerbacks have been outstanding. I'm going to write about that for CBS Sports, and I'm going to watch in detail the Tariq Woolen film, the UTSA speedster, freaky specimen at corner that was super duper raw and wasn't supposed to be ready to even contribute in a major way in year one, thrown into the fire because there's not really a lot else at the cornerback spot on the Seahawks roster. And he has been awesome. 4 interceptions through 6 games for Tariq Woolen, and the Seahawks have really surprised a lot of people starting 3-3. All right, that'll do it for me today. I'm Chris Trapasso, CBS Sports. Thank you so much for watching the Nameless Football Show.